Hey everybody, it's the next episode of Imaginarium. So what am I doing here? I think by now we've sort of explained ourselves. We're trying to build up a campaign that has a nice sense of realism, has a sense of volition for the players, and we want to try something a little bit off the beaten path. Right now we're working on picking out a system for us to run the campaign. Going to use the campaign world of Harn or Celestia, and we're going to develop kind of a little microcosm that our players are going to get to adventure in, and I'll share with you as I build that up into a little bit of a pyramid that hopefully when heads start to roll, they roll down the steps of the pyramid gloriously. We've already decided that we want the system to embrace the possibility that all three of the classic roles of fighter, magic user, and thief will be available. We want the system to allow for a sense of scale. We want things to be hard, just like it is for the peasants, and we want a sensation of otherwhere, that it's distinctly taking place in a pre-modern world. So we either need mechanical elements, or we need the flexibility from the system to get all of those. And I've spoken also about how I'm ambivalent to whether this system has divine magic in play or not. And I'm of a mind to let it be the case that the system doesn't care whether gods are real or not, because I think that that might engage the players more with the institutions of the churches if they just saw them as real-world institutions, much as religions are in real life. Preparing ourselves, we know that where we've been, and Harnmaster Gold unfortunately had a lot of roll-under mechanics, layered rolling, and complexities of arithmetic, and a combat system that just did not allow things to move along. It did have a nice character progression mechanic that I would like to preserve, absolutely, in the next campaign, but ultimately there was too many rolls, and there were not enough of them that could be abridged out and still preserve the realism and flavor of the system. And so I don't think it's possible for me to repeat again what I used for my last campaign, because it ended up devolving really quickly into a freeform situation where there was not a lot of tension because there was not the question of failure for the players. There are 4 systems on the table: Riddle of Steel, Gurps, Burning Wheel, and Ice and Fire Roleplaying. Depending on the type of campaign that I choose to do, it could certainly influence this, but I'm going to kind of just talk about the nuts and bolts and what I feel the limitations and advantages of each of these choices are. I do think that they're all fully available and would all be a good fit for Harn, depending upon your player group and what your priorities are for your campaign. If you were going to try a medieval game like this, I think you could pick any of them, but I'm going to kind of walk you through my process of picking one of them out. I think that these 3 systems, Rolemaster, RuneQuest, and Spellbound Kingdoms, could certainly be options for you, but I'm not going to consider those in detail. And so Harnmaster Gold's out, and these 4 guys are going to get considered. Okay, so Riddle of Steel is really focused on swordplay. It is absolutely a system that wants to give you not only kind of a gamist experience of cut and thrust and parry, but it also is in consultation with the author's experience of a CA Renaissance fair type reenactment fighting. It is absolutely a really good system for man-to-man combat. If you've got, a crop of badasses, then I think Riddle of Steel might be a good option for you. It's a D10 pool mechanic, which a lot of people are familiar with from World of Darkness type games, and I think that it takes that system and it goes as far as you can with the combat. and it's pretty interesting what they do with it in combat. On the other side of the coin, though, their skill system is sort of weak. You basically roll a pool of dice equal to your attribute, and then your skill rating is just 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and so on. Um, and by the same token, their magic system is sort of quirky and weird, and I don't think terribly portable. They go for the old magic ages you type situation, and then they make magic very powerful and sort of timeline and plot altering capable. So it's not your usual incantations and spell sigils and sort of, maybe Vancian magic without the Vancian slots that I think most people are ready to embrace. So you would have to rework that, and I would have to, and that's sort of dissuading me. It's also, it's got a reasonable amount of complexity, and I think that in order to get a good experience, the players would have to read the book in order to know like what they were doing as far as the swinging of the sword. You could of course just embrace the idea that, oh, I cut to the left, and then you look it up and you make it happen for the player, and that they could learn it kind of as they go. I'm not sure if I really have the gumption to spend the time really mastering the system before I ever know if the campaign is going to fire. Um, so all those elements kind of lead me to believe that it's sort of one-sided towards the fighter role, and I'm a little bit wary of that. Okay, so Gurps. Everybody knows the classic problem with Gurps. Their books and their supplements are a little bit scatterbrained. They have art from all kinds of genres, and your players, if they're looking at a book or a PDF of Gurps stuff, are not going to know what is cool with you. And so if they're considering new options for their characters as they're progressing, or if they're creating a character in a vacuum, which I don't think anyone should ever create a character by themselves. They should do it with their fellow players and hopefully with the GM so that everyone kind of works up to a good picture of the campaign. And that also means that you get an opportunity to give and take as the GM, and based on what kind of player character someone wants to create, you can kind of tailor the campaign and introduce elements during your brainstorming period to embrace that. So that's a little bit of an issue with Gurps, that genre blur. Gurps has a little bit of layered rolling, repetitive. It also is roll under again, but it's of course only on 3d6. And so, roll under, in order to set difficulty classes, you have to apply penalties, which it sort of feels like beating the players with a no stick, and you have to be okay with that. Slash, you need to find a way to break that barrier, because difficulty class, I think, is the most elegant way to kind of adjust the probability of success once you're doing task resolution. Target numbers is the other word for difficulty class. So penalties, to a roll under skill are a little bit less elegant and cognitively might not feel as good. Really speaking to Gurp's favor, however, is the fact that it would be easy to port the Harn Master magic system, which I think is core to the world, into Gurps, and I think I could make it work really readily. And I'm sort of excited about that, is that we wouldn't have any hiccup. I could, if somebody wanted to be a Sheikh Pavar, which is Harn's word for magic user, at the start of the game, I think I could make it happen for them. Because last time, I really pulled people's teeth and kept them from becoming magic users until almost once we were over the top into a freeform phase. So Gurps is also has as an asset finely calibrated point totals, both for enemies and players, which means that I can kind of really grasp the challenge level of encounters, or at least kind of scale things. And I know that if a villain is a wealthy merchant who can hire X number of mercenaries and so on, I kind of can gauge that through the fairly balanced points totals that Gurps reflects. Of course, I'm more familiar with 3rd edition, and I think the points totals were a more authentic measure of in-world power in 3rd edition. But just due to availability and polish and a couple things like that, and especially how the system handles items, I think that 4th edition is probably what I would go with. So that calibration is really very strong as an asset. Of course, Gurps also has the problem of if you want to make good choices in combat, then you probably need to read the rulebook, which players don't tend to do, and especially my players. Um, Especially the kind of, you know, people who I'm very comfortable gaming with and I think make for great cooperative storytellers with me, but do not seem to spend the time mastering the system. However, maybe this is just right at the happy medium point where I could get the players to start engaging with me about the system. So there's a possibility. Burning Wheel is a strong option. It's got really robust abstractions of combat and of social conflict. I do have some reservations that it's sort of like a piece of abstract art that I really find very compelling and interesting, but maybe other folks don't. And it does worry me that if I was trying to push Burning Wheel, I might get some pushback because I might feel like it's more elegant than it is. Burning Wheel leverages the whole idea that the player wants to do something, and so how are they going to do it, and what are the consequences? Much like Fate. However, it does retain a simulationist and a descriptive component to its mechanics. You don't just have those really vanilla plus and minus dice. And I think that that really clinches Burning Wheel's very authored feel. Lou Crane is a great guy. I think he's brought a lot of ideas to role-playing nowadays. He's the author. And if you like it, it might work for you. It's got the D6 rollover pool mechanic, not like Shadowrun. It's not like buckets and buckets of dice. And I think that it, as far as arithmetic and challenge level for people who might be on their 3rd or 4th beer, I think that it's very much a system that you can definitely roll with without a lot of concern for people's arithmetic skills. Of course, it does have a weird bookkeeping mechanic that I think may be a little bit of a challenge. Basically, your players need to check off checkboxes every time they roll for a skill, and they need to even be cognizant of if it is a difficult check or a challenging check and so on, and then that reflects how fast they progress with the skills. So I don't know about that. Song of Ice and Fire role-playing is really cool, trendy. It's got kind of a little bit of a vanilla mechanic where you roll pools of d6s and add them up. I think that's well within people's arithmetic skills, and it's really got, you know, a nice fun possibility that, you know, people are really into Game of Thrones, and I think if you're sitting down to roleplay nowadays, and people are enthusiastic enough to get out of the house, get off of their phone, and be at the table, it's probably because they've been watching the show, because it's easier to watch TV than it is to play D&D. And it kind of pigeonholes you into a fun area of medievalness, which is internoble intrigue, which I think is probably one of the best places if you're looking to run a plot-based, story-based campaign. And certainly in terms of drama, it may be to your advantage. I have some reservations about adding up the dice, but with d6s, since they have pips especially, you can read them from any angle, and I think I might be able to just add up people's dice for them if they're slow. So not too much of an... It's a good fit for certain types of campaigns, but it's not necessarily a good fit in general. So what am I going to do? Which system am I going to pick? I'd like a little bit of feedback on that, and especially what's going to be of more use to you guys if I create campaign materials. And so I'll leave it as a cliffhanger.